My name is Johanna Rupp, your host for this evening, and I'd like to begin by thanking each and every one of you for being here tonight in support of your local independent bookstore. Isabel Allende recently was quoted as calling us the cultural soul of our community, and it's really because of all of you, so thank you. Tonight, Book Passage welcomes you to a very special reading of the Rubber Orchestra, award-winning author and poet Nancy Johnson's posthumously published memoir. The book will be read by Ayelet Waldman, author of Red Hook Road, Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, and Daughter's Keeper. Also reading this evening is Vikram Chandra, author of Mirrored Mind, Love and Longing in Bombay, and Sacred Games. Arthur Bryant, Nancy's husband, will begin by introducing the book and the incredibly powerful story it tells. So if you all could please join with me in warmly welcoming Arthur.
Thank you very much. Now, to address the important things first, I need to tell you, I can't say the score because my brother-in-law TiVos the game, but it's the second quarter and the Warriors are doing very well. Thank you all for coming, and I want to thank Book Passage for hosting this event, and particularly Ayelet and Vikram. Venda Levita was scheduled to be here, and she sends her apologies. She was called out of town on short notice, can't make it. But the reason this was so important to me, and the reason I'm so grateful to have all of you here, is that when my wife Nancy passed away in 2012, she was close to finishing the memoir she had been working on for the past several years. Some of you are writers, most of you know writers, and what I can say is when this all started with an absolutely horrific car crash in August 2002, and then an unbelievable series of events after that that are chronicled in the book. Some good, a whole lot bad. But we got through them all. And my instinct was different from Nancy's because she's a writer, and her instinct, she had been an accomplished journalist, and then she decided to go for the big bucks and become a poet. And she'd been working on poetry. And then what happened was, after this car crash, she just felt she had to write this. And I'd heard writers talk about how they just had no choice, they had to write something. This is what she had to write. So what my real goal when she passed away was to get this book finished. And I will tell you, I want to thank everybody who helped with the process and going through it, but it was my real goal to have this book published for her. And so to me, while there's some horrible things you might hear about in the reading, and we went through some hard things, to me this is an absolutely glorious day. When you love somebody and you could do something that you know they really wanted, you can't get much better than that. So for making this a glorious day, I really want to thank Ayelet and Vikram. And Ayelet's going to read first and Vikram second. We'll take questions after that if anybody has any. Something that's small I want to say at the end, but thank you very much.
Hello. It's so nice to see all of you. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to launch in. This needs no introduction. By 10 o'clock, we are heading south on Highway 97, a two-lane string of road that stretches north-south through Oregon. Arthur is driving at the top of the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit since there isn't much traffic and the road is clear. It feels like a day made for travel and soaking up the season's last bits of leisure. He and I talk about how much we like the people we know in Oregon and that it would be a great place to live, except for the rain. We segue to how much we like living in the Bay Area. Just as we pass through the village of Lapine, 34-year-old Christopher Adney, who is heading north, realizes he has missed the entrance to his driveway and whips his wheel left to make a fast turn across the road. This split-second movement slams his Chevy Silverado 4x4 pickup truck into our station wagon. He blows us apart. Time slows down for us as our car propels into the air, spinning around and over and filling with dust. The impact is sucked up from the road at its shoulder. The sound of the impact reverberates as the car lands first on its roof and then deliberately and slowly rights itself. The air swirls brown with dirt that fills all the open space. As the car falls back to earth, flames erupt from its engine. The car's one airbag on the driver's side detonates, blowing out against Arthur's face and neck. The force of the crash has pushed the engine of the car backward into the interior. Its metal body folds around Arthur. The steering wheel pins his chest. The dashboard with the engine behind it crushes his legs. My head and neck snap forward into the dashboard and then back against the seat, causing the seat itself to fly into Wally's legs. The front windows comes crashing in. The rearview mirror slams into the left side of my forehead, and pieces of glass lodge themselves in my face and neck. The car's metal body breaks and slices into my left leg. The dashboard smashes into my right knee. I twist around to look at Wally. His stunned eyes are open wide. I turn my head back. My screams cut the air. Robert Carter, the first person to the scene, stops his car and runs over to our station wagon. He sees the engine on fire, and his impulse is to get people out if he can before the car explodes. Wally, alert in the back seat, responds to Mr. Carter's yelling to unlock his door and manages to pull up the lock. Carter pries open the door, unlatches the seatbelt, and grabs Wally under the arms to pull him out of the burning car. Wally falls as soon as he reaches ground. His leg is broken. Mr. Carter carries him to the side of the road. Paramedics, firefighters, and police arrive quickly. Traffic has already begun backing up on both sides of the road, which will remain closed for hours. The firefighters extinguish the engine fire and then work to get Arthur and me out of the wreck. Wally is lying on the road, on a board roadside, on top of thistles and dried grass and rocks. Mr. Adney is also lying on the ground. He had not been wearing a seatbelt, and the impact propelled him through the passenger side front window of his truck and out onto the street. Although he says he doesn't need to go, he is driven in an ambulance to a nearby hospital. State police at the scene charge him with 3 violations: driving without a license, driving without insurance, and driving without a seatbelt. That middle one is going to become very important later on in the book and in life. Emergency workers disentangle me from the new metal and glass sculpture formerly known as my car and put me on a stretcher close to Wally. He can see me, but I am unconscious and bloody from my head wounds. We are waiting for the medevac helicopter. As soon as it arrives, we are loaded on and flown to St. Charles Medical Center in Bend, Oregon, the nearest trauma hospital. Arthur's rescue, however, is not speedy. He is trapped in the driver's seat, the car enveloping his legs and torso. Emergency personnel work for over 2 hours. They remove the car door, cut away the metal they can, and finally use the jaws of life to pry Arthur from the car. His body is broken and smashed. No one imagines he will survive. He is also flown to St. Charles. After Arthur is out of the car, emergency workers search for clues to our identities. Our possessions, including my purse and Arthur's wallet, which he habitually takes out of his pocket and lays on the console as he drives, are strewn along the highway. Someone rifles through the pockets of Arthur's pants, cut off when the emergency crew is trying to get him out of the car, and finds a folded up piece of paper on which the name Jeff Foote and a phone number are written. This paper finds its way to a social worker at St. Charles who calls the number. When his cell phone rings, Jeff is in Mississippi driving to the airport to catch a plane back to his home in Portland, Oregon. The caller identifies himself as a social worker from the St. Charles Medical Center in Bend. He tells Jeff we were involved in an accident and asks him if he knows how to contact our family members. Jeff replies that Arthur's law offices, either in Oakland or Washington, D.C., would have numbers for Arthur's family, and that he thinks Arthur's parents live in Pennsylvania. The social worker also asks if there's anyone who lives close to Bend who might be able to come and stay with Wally, who is injured but is conscious. Jeff suggests Susan Saladoff, whose family was with ours at Sun River and whose daughter babysat Wally while we were there. Susan lives in Ashland, Oregon. Jeff says he's heading home to Portland and will drive down to the hospital early the next morning, and even though he presses for it, the social worker won't give him any information about injuries to Arthur or me.
Hi, I met Nancy at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore on my first day of graduate school, which was also the day that I began writing my first novel. So for me, her voice has always been associated with poetry and my life as a writer. And so it was strange and exhilarating and touching just to hear her in prose, which I had never really done. So I'm going to read two very short sections from near the end of the book. This one is titled Wednesday, January 14th, 2004. Here's what happens. When you have a long-term, extensive trauma, everyone gets used to living in trauma space. You get used to the abnormal. This struck me in the middle of the night. I brought Arthur home from the hospital yesterday about noon. He immediately went to bed because he hadn't been able to sleep much in the hospital, and he slept most of the afternoon. I woke him about 5 o'clock to see if he wanted to get up, have something to eat, talk to Wally. He did, and we managed to get him motoring on his crutches again. I was happy about having Arthur back, feeling the presence of his body in the bed, knowing he had made it through one more operation, one more round. But last night, Arthur wasn't able to get comfortable, had to sleep on his back, and then kept rolling from side to side, like having a log rolling around in bed with you. The log rolls into you, you wake up. The log rolls away, it moves the bed. About 1:30 a.m., the log turned on the light and started to read because it couldn't sleep. This is what I mean about getting used to trauma space. For a moment, I considered it normal that someone would get up in the middle of the night and turn on the lights to read, and then I thought, what's going on here? I went to the guest room. Wally was up at the same time, going into the bathroom. He said mommy in a plaintive 5-year-old way that allowed me to catch a glimpse of the younger child he had been. I've been dreaming, Mom. I've been dreaming that Uncle John and Chris keep giving me presents, and all the presents are burritos. I like burritos, but each new present was another burrito. Then he opened the bathroom door, went in, and shut it behind him. I went to sleep thinking about carpets on the floor of my head. I drew a Persian carpet there, then a rag rug, then a braided one, Tibetan. I furnished the inside of my skull with carpets. Then I walked into the room with a broom and tried to clean up. The carpets were covered with dried leaves. I was trying to remove the leaves and straighten the edges of the rugs, but the rugs kept crumpling in new ways. New leaves appeared. Trauma has a room of its own in my head. And then this is from the very end of the book. Thursday, June 1st, 2006, Mills College Children's School, Oakland, California. Arthur and I have taken seats in an old assembly room of the student union. The building was designed by the California architect Julia Morgan, and it smells of dark wood that covers the walls, floor, ceiling. The morning sun comes through the windows, turning everything into a slow-moving caramel. We looked through the commencement program, from the group photo of the 5th grade graduates on the cover to the schedule, ending with the statements each of the 5th graders has written as a conclusion to his or her time at Mills. As we read Wally's statement, both Arthur and I are looking for signs of psychological damage as a result of the accident. But Wally writes about a camping trip and the class sleepover in the 4th grade classroom. Everyone in my class and I went to a field and played flashlight tag, which was a blast. Then we went to Lake Aliso, which is my favorite spot on campus. It is so beautiful. He thanks his teachers and friends and us. I would like to thank my dad for all the hard work he did helping me prepare for the ICEE test. I would also like to thank my mom for helping me through everything from homework to problems with my friends. This is where the day resides for me, in this last sentence. This is where those last years reside for me. This sentence tells me I am a valuable parent. I will not have my mother's death, and I do not have my mother's life. My child's life is nothing like my childhood. My son has a strong sense of who he is. He is not afraid of what he wants, needs, desires, cherishes. He knows that he is loved and that his life was not destroyed by a traffic crash. Arthur and I are like all the other parents, waiting to see how wonderful a child looks walking through the graduate's doorway, reading his speech, accepting his certificate of completion. And we joke with each other about how funny it is to have a 5th grade graduation. Arthur says, what, we didn't expect him to finish 5th grade? We are like all the other parents. We are laughing and taking photographs and happy to see Wally goofing around with his friends. We hold hands, we are alive in the moment. We are like all the other parents out on the lawn after the ceremony, lining up for the potluck food, sitting on the grass balancing paper plates and talking about what our children look like in preschool, which of their quirks have survived since then, talking to people we may never see again because our children will be going on to different schools. Nearly 4 years have passed since the accident, and that whole time all we wanted to be was like other families. We wanted to have time to think about trivialities, to sit in the sun and eat lunch, to pick an ant off a paper plate. We do not want to look like Frankenstein's monster or the bald lady or a pirate. Today, I believe we are a rubber orchestra, having bounced back from disaster, the lip of destruction and obliteration. Wally is going into 6th grade next year, and we are all looking forward beyond this minute. We are behaving as if we have a future.
So, like I said, if there are questions, both Ayelet and Vikram and I are happy to take them. So let me just ask that first before I say the rest I was going to say. Any questions at all?
I have a question for you, Arthur.
Yeah.
What's it like? What's it like for you, the experience of having such an intimate family story put out in the world and having people read it, and people you know and people you don't know?
Well, I guess I'd say 2 things. One is because Nancy wanted to tell it. To me, it's great. And 2 is it's particularly surprising because we were a couple, but as a couple, I was the one who would tell everybody everything. And she was the one who didn't tell even me. So that she wrote this book. It's just like, oh, because if I said some of this stuff publicly, would I get help? So it's very weird. I mean, I feel like everything we went through, everything this book talks about and documents was real. And it really happened. And why say a false story? So to me, to say, here's what happened, here's how we got through it, and that we did, just makes me feel proud in some way. Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, Susan.
I'm curious, you said the book was almost finished when she died, so talk a little, if you don't mind, about that, getting it to the finish.
Well, sure, I think, and please, you can ask them questions too. And I'll even go on a little bit more about how it was finished. She had been working on it for some serious amount of time. And then what actually happened is while she was close to finished, the cancer came back. You didn't hear in the middle of the story. So what happened is, as a result of the car crash, they do CAT scans of your bodies to find out what's wrong, to see what's broken. And as they are airlifting me, still unconscious, or at least out of it, back from Oregon to California so Wally can go to school and Nancy can be around our friends, they tell her they have found a small ovarian cyst and she ought to have it looked at. So 7 months later, we are in the hospital. I'm in the hospital. I've gotten home. I'm in the hospital with a patch over my eye, a cane in my hand, while she's going in to get the ovarian cyst removed. And I will tell this in a way she didn't, but just because you will understand why. And there, my sister's here and was in the waiting room with us. And the doctor had said coming in, look, Arthur, we always know it could be cancer, so we have an oncologist on call. And it could be arthroscopically, it's done and it's easy and she goes home as soon as the surgery's done, or it could be messy. But either way, we'll let you know. And she comes back out after the surgery and she says, well, it was messier than we expected, so she's going to have to stay a couple of days. But the good news is, it's not cancer. Everybody relax, it's not cancer. Technically we have to wait till the test results come back. But we all looked at it, it's a dermoid, we didn't even call in the oncologist, it's not cancer. And so we go to see Nancy in the room and we tell her the great news and that's it and everything's fine. And 2 nights later the phone rings in our house. And this is not in the book the way I experienced it, obviously. And it is the doctor. And she says to me, Mr. Bryant, I am so sorry, we are stunned. The test results just came back and it's cancer. And I'm standing there with the patch over my eye and the cane in my hand thinking, who did we piss off? Like, what did we do to deserve this? And then she says, but you need to know. Ovarian cancer never has any symptoms until it's too late. Stage 3 or stage 4. This is stage 1. And we think we're going to beat it. And I'm absorbing all this and I say to her, are you telling me you think this car crash saved my wife's life? And she says, yeah, that's what I think happened. So wrap your head around, right? But I don't even remember the question anymore. But
Finishing the book. How did
finishing the book. So, yes, I'm very sorry. Right. So, the cancer had come back. That's why I mentioned it, because there was no mention that there was cancer. The cancer had come back. We were told if it stays away 5 years, she got treatment. If it stays away 5 years, she's home free. 2 weeks short of 5 years, it came back. And she was almost done with the book. And she was struggling with chemo and all that. And she had gotten it in, I think, honestly, she was, part of her was afraid to finish it because she knew what happened after the book ended. And her imagination of going on Oprah, or all the book tours and being asked the obvious question, so how'd it go? And knowing the cancer was back and knowing what, all the trauma we've been through since, I think part of it was that. But she had come up with a new idea she wanted to investigate a little further about the devil and investigating that. And so, but it hadn't been fleshed out, and she said, I'm very close, but it's really the chemo that stopped her from finishing it. So, sorry for this long-winded answer. But so when it finished, and she passed away, and I went to her writer friends, and they said, Arthur, we feel so close to her and the book, because they were in writers' groups and passing the things back and forth. So we don't feel like we can objectively evaluate if it's a good book, or how good it is. So they said, you need to go find a professional editor who can read it and tell you, and they helped me find a really great one who called me and said, this is an incredible piece of work. This is absolutely publishable quality. And you just need to find an agent who knows this as well as I do. And I found 2 different agents with Ayelet's help and with other author friends' help. Crackerjack agents who read it and basically said, here's the deal. This is an incredible piece of work. This is top notch. But the way the industry works now is no publisher will buy a memoir by somebody who's not already famous unless they're around to pitch the book. And your wife isn't. So the only way it's going to happen is if you publish it yourself. So, and she said, and yes, if Nancy were alive, I'd ask her about tweaking this particular scene or that something or other, but it's that close, it doesn't matter. And so that's how it came to be published. And Jay and Pat, who are in the audience, helped me publish it, who are superb at doing that. But that's my very long-winded, everybody's now going to be afraid to ask me the question.
It's fascinating. We're not afraid.
So, any other questions?
Did you tweak the scenes?
No, I didn't. We ended up hiring a copy editor. who went through with fine copy editing, and there was occasional times where I could say, no, she wouldn't talk that way, or something like that. But I did no tweaking of anything. There were some, as you'll see when you read in it, I mean, I believe no couple, no family can get through something like this without huge, issues. The very first therapist I went to after the crash, on our first meeting, says to me, you need to know that when couples both have brain injuries, 95% of them end up divorced. And I came out and reported this to Nancy. This is not in the book. Whose response was, well, screw her. And she said, and I wouldn't want you to see her anyway, so what's that? Did you see how she dressed? You can't go to a woman who dresses like that. It's like,
I think we have time for one last question.
yes.
I haven't read the book, but I was going to ask you, how did your son, how involved was he in the process, and how he's been exposed to the book and what his reactions were to the mom and dad?
Thank you. He was not involved in the process. I offered him a chance. When did he want to read it? And he didn't want to read it till it had come out. And when he did read it, and I should say, he had a very much different experience because he was reliving the trauma he lived through. But he lived through it at age 7 to 10, and now he's 20. So he had wanted the book published. He knew his mom wanted it finished, and so he was thrilled about that. But he came to me after the book was published, and he said, I got to tell you, I didn't, there were things happening I had no idea of. He said, I understand that I was 7 and you would not share these with me and you were protecting me, but it's pretty stunning to be 20 and read this and feel myself emotionally back in that stage and learning what was really going on. So he would be here. He actually really wanted to read here tonight, but he has cystic fibrosis and he's in for a 2-week tune-up in UCSF right now, so he can't be. The one other, was there
One more question.
Okay. The only other thing I wanted to add is if you haven't read it, obviously I hope you will. If you do read it and you think well of it, one of the results of my having to publish it is we have no, marketing arm. And the real key is word of mouth. If you know a book, if you're in book clubs, if you know of, cancer victims groups, if you know of women's groups, if you know of, car crash groups, motorist groups, I can come up with as many, places with little kids, things with women, with men. I'm making it as broad as possible. Please do everything you can to spread the word, because I would like as many people as possible to know what she did. That's it. Thank you.